She laughed while putting on mascara. Not a joyful laugh. Not even amused. It was one of those short, breathy sounds people make when they think they've already won. I was leaning against the doorframe, holding my coffee like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The steam from the mug fogged my glasses, but I didn't move. She was brushing her lashes in small, confident strokes. The mirror lit her face just enough to make her look younger than she was. Prettier. Sharper. "Don't be jealous," she said without turning. "It's just dinner." I didn't answer right away. There's a strange kind of silence that happens when you realize the rules of your life have been rewritten without your permission. That was the kind of silence I stood in. "A date?" I finally asked, and the words felt like they fell out of someone else's mouth. She met my eyes in the mirror. There wasn't shame. There wasn't even hesitation. "I'm not cheating. I'm evolving." She said it like she'd practiced. Like some self-help podcast told her those were the magic words. My hand clenched around the mug. "And what am I supposed to be, Dana? Your anchor while you drift off into new versions of yourself?" She capped the mascara, grabbed her purse, and kissed the air in my general direction. "Curtis, grow up." And then came the sound I've replayed in my head 1,000 times since. Her boots on the stairs. Each step was a countdown. Each thud, a little louder than it needed to be. Front door opened. Closed. I didn't move. Didn't even blink. The hallway still smelled like her, citrus and cold air, and that smugness she thought I wouldn't detect. I walked back to the bedroom. She'd left her phone charging on the nightstand. Unlocked. I stared at it. I didn't want to touch it. I wanted to believe she was bluffing, that this was all some psychological war she was waging just to make me feel small without actually doing anything monstrous. But the phone lit up. "See you at 7, beautiful. Landon." The preview was followed by a heart emoji and a photo I won't describe. My stomach didn't sink. It burned. The kind of burn that starts behind your ribs and spreads into your spine. I scrolled. I shouldn't have, but I did. He called her D. She called him my reset button. They had a shared photo album. One picture showed the two of them sitting by a lake I'd never been to. It was time-stamped 2 weekends ago, the same weekend she'd told me she was attending a women's wellness retreat in Aspen. I sat on the edge of the bed and Porter, our dog, walked in, tail wagging like nothing was wrong. I looked at him and whispered, "She's gone, buddy." He laid his head on my foot like he understood more than he should. But here's the thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because in the photo album, in the folder she had titled Private/Safe, there was something else. Something she never meant for me to see. And that's when everything began to unravel. I didn't even mean to open the folder. My fingers just moved. Like something in me needed confirmation of what my heart already knew. And there it was. A gallery of images she thought she'd tucked away where I'd never look. Some were blurry selfies. Others were well-framed shots from scenic locations. Dana was smiling in every one of them. That real, wide smile she hadn't shown me in months. But that wasn't what wrecked me. The final photo in the album wasn't romantic. It wasn't even sexual. It was a candid photo of me, taken from behind. I was sitting at the kitchen table, probably grading papers or scrolling through old emails. The timestamp showed it was from last month. And the caption underneath read, "He has no idea. LOL. That's what tore something inside me. Not the betrayal. I could have handled another man. I could have handled lies. But mockery? That quiet, cruel amusement behind my back. That was something else entirely. I stared at my own image, hunched, unaware, in my worn gray hoodie, and I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. A character she kept around to play a part in her suburban fantasy while she ran off and lived her real life somewhere else. Somewhere I wasn't invited. I put the phone down and just sat there. The seconds felt like hours. The dog had curled up on the floor. The house was dead quiet. That kind of silence that only shows up when something permanent has shifted. But I didn't yell. Didn't scream. I just started writing. It wasn't a revenge plan. I'm not that guy. I just needed to get it out of my system. Every thought, every missed signal, every red flag I'd brushed aside because I wanted to believe we were okay. I wrote about the way she started wearing her hair differently, how she stopped kissing me goodnight, how she changed her phone's lock code 3 times in a week. And then I wrote the question that had been eating me alive. How long has she been waiting for me to figure it out? Because that's what it felt like she'd been living on borrowed time, just waiting for me to catch up so she wouldn't have to lie anymore. When she came home, it was almost midnight. I could smell cheap cologne that wasn't mine. Her makeup had faded a little, but she still looked polished, too polished for just dinner. She didn't expect me to be awake. She paused when she saw me sitting at the table. Her eyes flicked to the phone beside me, then back to my face. And for the first time in years, she looked nervous. She opened her mouth to say something, but I beat her to it. I saw the photos. Her body stiffened like someone had poured ice water down her spine. All of them, I added. Especially the one where you laughed at me. Dana didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She just lowered herself into the chair across from me, eyes locked on the floor like it might offer her an excuse she hadn't thought of yet. And then she did something I never imagined. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory. It wasn't kindness either. It was tired, hollow, like she'd just been released from a burden. And then she said, "I thought you'd find it sooner." That sentence hit harder than any confession could have. It meant she didn't care enough to hide it. It meant she didn't respect me enough to come clean before I had to dig. I should have exploded. I should have thrown the phone, demanded names, dates, timelines. But all I asked was, why? She looked at me like I was the dumbest man alive. Like the answer had always been obvious. And then, in the most casual, detached tone I've ever heard, she said, "Because I was bored." Just like that. 3 words. 12 years of marriage, tossed into the garbage like last week's leftovers. But here's where the story twists. Because something else happened after that, something she didn't plan for. The phone vibrated. She instinctively reached for it, forgetting I still had it. I turned the screen toward her. New message from unknown. He knows. I told him everything. Dana's face turned pale. And that's when I realized. She wasn't in control anymore. For the first time that night, she looked truly scared. Not defensive. Not annoyed. But afraid, and not of me. That message lit up her face like a spotlight on a guilty actor. She stared at the phone as if it might detonate in her hands. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "You don't know who that is, do you?" I asked, though I already had a hunch. She said nothing. The phone vibrated again. "You should have come clean. Now it's too late." I didn't recognize the number. But Dana did. She flinched like the words had slapped her. And then, finally, she looked at me. Really looked at me. No more bravado. No more smug smiles or philosophical nonsense about evolution and finding herself. Just wide, frantic eyes. "Curtis, we need to talk," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word like it didn't want to come out. "I think we're past that," I replied. But she shook her head. "No, you don't understand. I think someone's trying to hurt me." That part one hadn't expected. I blinked. "You? Or us?" Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone. I didn't stop her. I watched her scroll through old messages, faster and faster, until she reached one I couldn't see from where I sat. Her face went pale again, then green. She shoved the phone away like it was toxic. I picked it up and read what was on the screen. "He deserved to know. The baby changes everything." I stared at it, reread it, then read it again, but my brain kept short-circuiting the same way over and over. The baby? Whose baby? Ours? That wasn't possible. Dana had said for years that kids weren't in the cards. She claimed she wasn't built for motherhood. I had mourned that dream a long time ago. So why now? "I'm not pregnant," she whispered too quickly. I mean, I didn't think I was. "I don't know." That word, "don't," rattled something deep inside me. "Is it Landon's?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I don't know," she said again, softer this time. "It could be his. Or..." My heart skipped. "Or who?" She froze. You could practically hear the gears grinding in her head, weighing which line might do less damage. But she must have realized there was no good option anymore. "It could be Troy's," she muttered. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. "Troy is in, my cousin?" She nodded slowly, shamefully, and then added, "I didn't mean for that to happen. It was stupid. It was one time. It was when we had that fight about the Thanksgiving trip." I remembered that night. She said she was going to her mother's for 2 days to clear her head. I stayed back because I had the flu and didn't want to infect her mom. Apparently, she wasn't too worried about infection elsewhere. "So let me get this straight," I said, still somehow calm. "You've been seeing Landon, and you slept with my cousin, and now one of them might be the father of a baby you didn't even think you were carrying?" Her head dropped like it weighed 100 pounds. "And someone else knows," I added. "Someone who's messaging you from a hidden number and clearly wants me to know the truth." Dana wiped her eyes. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to tell you, eventually." "That's the thing," I said, standing up. "You all think eventually is good enough. But it never is. Because eventually always comes after the damage. I took her phone and forwarded the text to myself. Then I walked to the hall closet and grabbed the overnight bag I kept for conferences. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. She followed me to the door. Curtis, please, don't go. I stopped, not because I wanted to stay, but because there was one more thing I needed to say. You called this evolution, remember? I said, not looking back. But you weren't evolving. You were escaping. I left the house and didn't even bother slamming the door. I just got in my car, turned the key, and drove. No destination. No plan. Just movement. But 20 minutes later, my phone rang. The number was hidden, and the voice on the other end wasn't hers. I pulled over on a shoulder somewhere between nowhere and somewhere south of Boulder, the tires crunching on loose gravel as I let the car idle. It was dark. Headlights off. The inside of my car felt like a capsule sealed in quiet panic. I stared at the screen. No caller ID. The kind of call you don't answer, unless you're desperate for answers. I slid my finger across the screen. Hello. The voice was male. Measured. Almost too calm. You don't know me, Curtis. But I know her. And I know what she's done to you. My heart pounded. Who is this? I'm not the enemy, the voice continued. But you needed the truth. And she was never going to give it to you. I stayed silent. I sent the messages, he admitted. And the photo. What photo? There was a pause. You haven't found it yet, he said. It's on her backup drive. Top drawer of her office desk. Labeled Studio Renders. Password is your mother's maiden name. I nearly dropped the phone. Why should I believe any of this? Because you already know I'm telling the truth. You just haven't seen all of it yet. The call ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence again. I sat there breathing shallowly, my grip tight on the wheel. I thought of turning the car around. I thought of never going back at all. But then another thought settled in, heavier than any of the betrayal so far. What if this wasn't just infidelity? What if there was more? Back at the house, Dana was still up. She was pacing when I pulled into the driveway. I could see her silhouette through the window. She didn't expect me back, and definitely not this fast. I walked straight past her and headed toward her small office. She tried to block me. Curtis, please. You don't need to go through my things, But I was already pulling open the drawers. She lunged for the flash drive when I found it, but I was quicker. I stepped back, plugged it into my laptop, and entered my mother's maiden name. The folder opened in an instant, and that's when everything inside me twisted. The files weren't just images. They were videos. 8 short clips. All in HD. All time-stamped. I clicked on one randomly. What played made my jaw tighten until my teeth ached. Dana was in a hotel room, laughing. Not just laughing, giggling. Her top was halfway off. She was sitting on the lap of a man whose face I didn't recognize immediately. But then I realized something. It wasn't Landon. It wasn't Troy. It was my colleague, Marcus. Marcus, the assistant principal from my school. He'd been to our house. He'd toasted our anniversary. And in the background of the video, behind the two of them tangled in flirtation and champagne, was something that didn't belong there, my backpack. Sitting on the floor, half-zipped. The one that had gone missing a month ago at work. She had it. Or he did. Dana tried to explain. Her voice was desperate. I didn't know they were saved. I swear, Curtis, he recorded them without me knowing. It was never supposed to be. You didn't know he was recording? I turned, my voice low. But you looked straight at the camera. She froze. Then I played the last video. The file name had no date. Just a title, Insurance. The video showed Dana talking directly to the camera. She was sitting in our kitchen. Alone. She looked serious, different from the others. If Curtis ever finds out, she said, I'll say he hit me. That he was controlling. I'll have messages. I'll have screenshots. He's too soft to fight back. And they'll believe me. My knees almost buckled. She didn't react like someone caught. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Instead, she whispered, I only recorded that because Marcus told me to. He said it was for protection. I didn't mean it. But that wasn't the part that broke me. The part that broke me was knowing she was right. I had been too soft. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't accused. I hadn't demanded explanations. I had given her every opportunity to be honest. And she'd used that silence as cover to sharpen the blade. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smash anything. I simply stood up and said, you don't need to lie anymore. Not to me. And I walked back out the door. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was done being the last person in my own life to know the truth. And somewhere out there, someone else knew more. I drove for hours that night, west into the dark where the roads wind between canyons and old timber yards. I didn't even know what town I was in until the sun cracked over the mountains and lit up a gas station with a flickering neon sign and a single pump that looked like it hadn't worked in a decade. I pulled into a diner across the street, sat at the farthest booth, and let the weight of everything settle on me like wet cement. That last video, the so-called insurance, looped in my head. Dana's calm, practiced voice saying she'd claim abuse if I ever found out. And the worst part? She wasn't panicking because she thought I'd hurt her. She was panicking because her plan fell apart too early. She didn't expect someone else to expose her. And she definitely didn't expect me to stop being the passive, soft-hearted placeholder she'd quietly despised for years. I didn't touch my coffee. I just sat there, watching cars pass, trying to make sense of how I had ended up as the final blind man in a room full of people wearing masks. And then something else hit me. The voice on the phone. The guy who called me after I left. He knew too much. Way too much. Things I hadn't even known until I dug deep into that flash drive. If he knew about Dana's recording, about her office setup, her backup drive, then maybe he wasn't some random whistleblower. Maybe he wasn't trying to save me. Maybe he was part of it. I left the diner and started calling the few people who had been close to Dana over the years. Most didn't answer. One old friend, Ellie, did. She sounded nervous. More nervous than made sense. Curtis, you shouldn't be digging into this. Just leave it. I know it hurts, but it's not worth it. I asked her what she meant by not worth it. But she clammed up. I've already said too much. Just be careful, okay? The call ended fast. I didn't even have time to ask her if she knew Marcus. And that's when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One message. Look in your truck bed. My heart kicked hard in my chest. I ran outside, expecting a prank or a trap or maybe a dead crow nailed to the tailgate like some twisted warning. But what I found was worse. There was a padded envelope taped under the bed liner. Carefully placed. Wrapped in plastic. Whoever left it had done it clean, quiet. I pulled it out and opened it in the cab of the truck with trembling fingers. Inside were three things. A burner phone. A USB stick labeled 3B/control. A folded photo of Dana and Marcus, laughing, arms around each other, standing in front of a building I recognized instantly, the admin wing of my school. It was dated 2 months ago, and Dana was wearing my school's visitor badge. I turned on the burner phone. Only one app was installed, a secure messaging platform. I opened it. One chat thread. Unknown. Still think this was just about you? That line hit different. I inserted the USB into my laptop. This time, it wasn't videos. It was spreadsheets. Email threads. A Word document titled Strategy 3B, Exit and Leverage. The file detailed a plan to fabricate a harassment claim involving me. The names on the document made my stomach twist. Dana's, Marcus's, even Troy's. There were dates, instructions, even digital mock-ups of text conversations that painted me as an obsessive, volatile husband. Messages I never wrote but could have easily passed for real if they were ever shown to a judge or a school board. This wasn't just cheating. This was a setup. An entire narrative had been in the works to dismantle my reputation, possibly my job, and leave me looking like the villain in my own life. And Dana? She was central to all of it. A willing architect. But there was still one piece missing. Why? Money? Maybe. Dana had always been weirdly curious about my district retirement plan and the life insurance policy I never changed from her name. But this was too elaborate just for cash. There had to be more. I stared at the burner phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed. Who are you? Why are you helping me? The reply came in seconds. Because you weren't supposed to survive this. My skin went cold. I stared at those words until they blurred. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was a warning. And I had no idea who else was involved. I didn't go home. Not because I was afraid of Dana. I was afraid of what else I didn't know. That USB had cracked the surface of something much bigger than infidelity. What scared me more than the betrayal, more than the staged text messages or the edited screenshots, was the phrase from the anonymous contact. You weren't supposed to survive this. That wasn't a metaphor. That wasn't emotional sabotage. That was something else. Something colder. I checked into a roadside motel on the edge of town under a fake name. I paid in cash and parked my truck behind the building where it couldn't be seen from the highway. I turned off both phones, the regular one and the burner. I needed to think without noise, without panic. But that quiet didn't last long. Someone knocked at my door the next morning. 3 sharp knocks. Then silence. I didn't move. They knocked again, twice this time, then slid something under the door. A single Polaroid. It was a photo of Dana, crying, seated on a bench outside our house. The image was fresh. You could tell by the faint glow of dawn behind her and the fact that she was holding a mug I'd last seen on our kitchen counter. But what made my heart stall was the note written across the bottom of the photo in thick black marker. "You're not the only one she lied to." I opened the door fast. No one was there. The hallway was empty, the parking lot dead quiet except for a man unloading crates of milk into a vending machine on the far side of the building. I scanned the area. No footprints in the dust, no strange cars. Just silence. I closed the door and turned the photo over. On the back, a phone number was scribbled in red ink. I stared at it for a long time before dialing. A woman answered. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. Her voice was steady, but low, like someone who'd been holding in too much for too long. "My name is Lorna." The name meant nothing to me, until she said the next part. "I used to be Marcus's wife." That stopped me cold. She continued, without waiting for me to catch up. "You're not the first. I found everything over a year ago. The videos, the plan templates. He tried the same thing with me, financial drain, digital framing, psychological unraveling. Except I got out before he finished the story. I gripped the receiver. Why didn't you go to the police?" They didn't believe me. Marcus is smart. He's persuasive. He's got connections in places that should have raised alarms. And besides, I didn't have enough. Just pieces. Just patterns. Until I saw Dana's name. I was trying to track too many threads at once. "How did you know about Dana?" "About me. You weren't hard to find once I knew what to look for," she replied. "He uses the same formula. Woman in chaos. Man with benefits. Eliminate the threat. Rewrite the narrative. Collect the fallout. He's done it before, Curtis. You just happened to be the first one who fought back." I sat down on the motel bed, everything spinning. "You're the one who sent the messages," I said. "No," she replied. "I sent the photo. I found you because someone else was already watching." That chilled me more than anything else she'd said. "Someone else?" I asked. "Who?" There was a pause, then a slow, tired breath. "I don't know their name. But they've been collecting things, files, documents, footage. Not just on Dana. On Marcus. On others. I think they're trying to expose something. Or maybe just burn it all down." A knock interrupted our call. Not at the motel this time. On her end. She gasped. "They're here." Then the line went dead. Static. Then silence. I tried calling back. No answer. I waited. Nothing. An hour later, I turned the burner phone back on. One new message. "Now you understand. Finish what she started, or disappear like the rest." I stared at it for a long time, then threw the phone against the wall. Not out of rage. Out of clarity. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This wasn't just about Dana, or Marcus, or their plan to frame me. This was something designed, a system. And whoever was behind it knew I had one thing they didn't count on. Proof. The kind that couldn't be denied. And now, I had to decide, do I burn quietly? Or blow the whole thing wide open? I didn't leave the motel that day. I barely moved. I sat in the faded chair by the window, staring out at the dusty lot, wondering which parked car belonged to the person who told me to finish what she started. That phrase echoed louder than it should have. It wasn't just threatening. It sounded scripted, like something rehearsed, like I was part of a play, and everyone else already had their lines memorized except me. By nightfall, I knew hiding wouldn't protect me. Dana and Marcus hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, they had architected a collapse. And whoever else was behind this was smart enough to plant phones, hack documents, fabricate messages. It was a machine, and I had stepped directly into its gears. So I went back to the house. Not for Dana. For the one place I hadn't checked, the one place no one ever thinks to look. Inside the house. Inside the walls. There's an old crawl space behind the garage. Years ago, I had started converting it into storage, but gave up halfway through. You wouldn't even know the wall panel opened unless you had installed it yourself, which I had. At 3:12 a.m., flashlight in one hand and crowbar in the other, I pried the panel off and crouched into the narrow darkness. I expected dust, maybe old cables, maybe nothing. What I didn't expect was a heat-sealed bag wedged behind a beam. I pulled it out and laid it across the workbench. It was heavier than it looked. Inside were 4 things. A stack of printed emails. Dozens of them. Conversations between Marcus and Dana, but also between Marcus and someone named RH. A leather-bound journal. The kind you buy from boutique stores, the kind that's meant to last decades. A spare hard drive. A passport. Not Dana's. Not Marcus's. Mine. Except it was a duplicate. Same name. Same photo. But with stamps from countries I'd never visited. Airports I'd never stepped foot in. And one very clear customs stamp from Germany, dated 4 days from now. I stared at it, my breath shortening. This wasn't just identity theft. It was replacement. Someone, Dana, Marcus, someone higher up, had begun fabricating an entire parallel version of my life. I opened the journal and started flipping through. It wasn't Dana's handwriting. It wasn't mine either. But it told a story. A man named Curtis Harland. Moved abroad. Divorced his wife. Left the country amid allegations of harassment and professional misconduct. He found peace overseas. It read like a memorial written for someone who was still alive. Me. And then I understood. I was never supposed to be destroyed publicly. That's too messy. Too risky. I was supposed to vanish quietly. They were going to burn down the identity I actually lived and replace it with this carefully scripted fiction. The narrative was already written, and it was about to happen. The emails made that even clearer. One line from Marcus to RH read, "Final phase begins Friday. If he resists, we'll use the fallback narrative." There was another email, marked urgent, from Dana herself. "He's too calm. I think he's onto something. If he finds the wall file, we move the clock forward. I'll call Troy to start the incident. I nearly dropped the page. The incident? I dug deeper. In one of the final emails from Marcus, dated only a day ago, it read, "Keep your phone on. As soon as he breaks, we'll get the footage. Spin it, close it, bury it. Just like Chicago." Chicago. Lorna, Marcus's ex, had said he'd done this before. Chicago must have been the last man who tried to fight back. I grabbed the hard drive, stuffed everything into my backpack, and left the garage like it was a burning building. I drove without headlights for 5 miles, heart hammering against my ribs. Somewhere between panic and clarity, I realized what the anonymous voice meant when he said, "You weren't supposed to survive this." Because I wasn't. They were going to erase me. Not just ruin me, replace me, explain me away, plan a paper trail that said I'd chosen to walk away from everything. Only I didn't. I had all the proof now. But I still didn't know who RH was, or how far this machine really reached. All I knew was one thing. If they had a plan, I needed to write a better one. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the cab of my truck outside a 24-hour printing shop, watching the lights flicker in the windows while the old printer inside whirred away at 100 pages of evidence. I had printed everything, the emails, the screenshots, the photos, the video transcripts, even the fabricated passport and journal entries. I didn't know who I could trust, but I knew I needed to put the truth somewhere it couldn't be erased. And I needed someone to listen. The next morning, I walked into the school district headquarters with 2 copies of the entire file in a locked briefcase. I asked to speak to the director of HR. When she looked at me warily, I simply said, "I'm about to be accused of something I didn't do, and I can prove it." They brought in legal. They brought in tech security. I sat through 2 hours of questions, walked them through the timeline, and handed over the hard drive. When I showed them the planted messages and the backup recordings, there were no arguments. Just quiet glances and slow nods. They suspended Marcus on the spot. Dana was another matter. I didn't press charges. I didn't threaten her. I didn't go to her mother's or stage some dramatic confrontation. I did something she never expected. I filed for divorce. Clean, clear, uncontested. I attached every shred of evidence to the paperwork, including a notarized affidavit to ensure she couldn't spin her story legally or financially. She tried to fight it at first, called me crying, left voicemails. She said she'd lost control, that Marcus had manipulated her, that she wasn't herself. I didn't reply, not once. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't cold. I was finished. 3 weeks later, something strange happened. Lorna, Marcus's ex, resurfaced. She asked to meet in person. I agreed. We sat at a quiet cafe outside of Denver. She was calm now. No more fear in her voice, just clarity. "He'll try to rebuild," she said, stirring her tea. "He always does. But you stopped him this time. That's more than most of us ever did." I asked her why she got involved. Why she sent me the photo. Why she risked being dragged back into it. She smiled softly. "Because I saw you were still trying to save her," she said. And I needed you to stop before she pulled you under, too. We sat for a while, watching a dog chase birds in the park across the street. For once, the silence felt like peace. And that's when I realized something important. I wasn't broken. I wasn't the fool. I wasn't the man everyone used. I was the one who got out. I sold the house within a month. Changed my number. Transferred to a new school district in Oregon. I didn't run. I moved forward. My story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about rebuilding. Quietly. Intentionally. Porter still rides in the back seat of my truck with his tongue out like he owns the wind. And me? I started journaling again. Not to track red flags or document lies, but to remind myself that survival is not the same as living. I live now. Fully. Somewhere in another state. Dana is probably telling someone a version of the story that makes her feel better. I'm not angry about that. Let her rewrite what she needs. I know the truth. And I finally know who I am. Not a victim. Not a placeholder. Not a man erased. But a man who walked through fire. And kept walking.